Welcome to Champions of the Lost Causes. I'm your host, Marvin Stockwell, and I'm here with Doug Pick, CEO of Feedmore in Richmond, Virginia, on the first interview of the second annual Champions of the Lost Causes podcast road trip. Thank you so much for taking the time,
Oh, wonderful. We're honored that you're here. Excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, and I just got the tour. Incredible work that you do feeding people. And that can be so multifaceted. That happens in so many different ways. Here at the outset, Doug, could you just kind of paint a picture for the work that Feedmore does, broadly speaking?
Sure. So Feedmore is Central Virginia's core hunger relief organization. Mm-hmm. Within that service area of ours, that's 29 counties and 5 cities. Mm-hmm. We serve somewhere between 200 and 225,000 food insecure individuals each and every year.
Wow.
The definition of food insecurity would be that you're not sure where your next meal is coming from. Within that group, my goodness, there are certainly families, there are kids and numerous kids programs because they deserve a fighting chance in life, mm-hmm. and there's seniors. We have a Meals on Wheels program. Feedmore is actually considered probably one of the most complex food assistance group in the country. In that, we're a food bank. Mm-hmm. that moves and distributes probably about 40 million pounds of food each year, or up to that now these days. And then a Meals on Wheels program, which serves about 2,500 seniors each and every day. And then a Steve and Sarah Baird Community Kitchen, which does about 15,000 meals a week. So when you add all that up, there's a lot of complexity to meet the various needs of our constituents, of our clients, and our geography, which is, of course, urban and rural. Mm-hmm. And it's a fascinating mission, fascinating enterprise that has stood the test of time and more to come.
Wow. You know, when I started this podcast back in 2019, I was really thinking about my own cause, saving and reopening the shuttered Mid-South Coliseum. It's a preservationist cause. It was a demolition threat. So there was a crisis that animated us. And over the time of doing the podcast, I realized there are those types of causes. There's the kind of like crisis of opportunity, an adaptive reuse of a building, for instance, or clean up a river. But some of those things, they're championed and then they're done, right? Like yes. The building got built, the river got cleaned up, yes. And then it's a matter of maintenance. But the cause of feeding people who are hungry is in that class that I've encountered, which is the kind of perpetual cause.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit, Doug, about how you got drawn to this work and what sorts of meaning is it for your life personally, and that Feedmore, that you're leading Feedmore, and that Feedmore is addressing this need, this pervasive and multifaceted need in the community?
Sure, Marvin. And I love your delineation of kind of project oriented. I won't say one-time event, but certainly you can time bound some of those causes. Whereas this one, as much as we would probably like to time bound it, it is not. We have not solved hunger,
right,
in the world or in the country, and so it is ongoing. It's a cause that I would say I've been familiar with since I was 10 years old, and not that I lived this life, not that I've experienced it, but I grew up in a family where. To whom much is given, much is expected. I grew up with a father who felt that part of our job on this earth was to give back, was to sort of look after those with less. So I'll never forget one Saturday morning, I had an older brother, Lonnie, and Dad goes, gentlemen, or boys, come with me. Mm-hmm. 2 peach baskets, old blue Bel Air station wagon with the wings behind it.
Wow, yeah. And
we went to the local grocery store, Mickermack, and filled it up with food, and we went to Lori Turner's house. And Lori was a lovely, lovely lady, African-American lady, who had a single mom, who had 3 children, Sookie, the oldest, Michael, and Wendell. And this is a kid who had not literally been on the other side of the tracks, as the old saying goes, and the Turners did indeed. It was my first experience of seeing, I would dare say, abject poverty. Mm-hmm. And came into the house with a smell I wasn't accustomed to, a wood stove, and a house that probably hadn't been cleaned a lot, and holes in the walls with newspaper stuffed in to prevent the drafts. And my dad was a person that never met a stranger, and he raised us that way. So Lonnie and I, Dad came in, and he spent time talking to Mrs. Turner, Lori, and Lonnie and I spent time playing with the 3 kids. out in the fields, next to the tracks, literally next to the house. And I guess we must have played, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. And it was my first real experience of people who didn't necessarily look like me.
Right.
At 10 years old. I quickly understood at 10 years old that there's no differences in us. Kids play. My father became very attached to Ms. Turner. And the family stayed together. We've kept up with them throughout the years. We came from different parts of the county, but we went to the same high school. And it's wonderful. Sookie became a nurse, and Wendell became an architect, and Michael unfortunately ended up in the penitentiary. And that happens in families, all different walks of life and different journeys for each of them. But I understood then the joy of that. I understood that people are all the same. They got into their positions oftentimes through no fault of their own, and the circumstances in life require others to help. And from there I went and became a big brother at a boys' orphanage run by a Catholic church, even though I was Methodist, and a bunch of nuns, which was an interesting experience for this old Methodist boy.
Sure.
And again, I got to understand, I don't know how I got into that, but I came to understand the immense joy of giving, the immense joy of being with other humans, that you can give them that hand. And somehow it stuck with me. It was part of the DNA of our family. This is the same father that took us to 7 different religions on a 2-year cycle in little old Roanoke, Virginia.
Wow.
Because he wanted us to understand that religions weren't that different.
That's true.
Fascinating, Marvin. The top 6 religions of the world all believe you ought to feed the hungry.
That's true.
They all have some version of the golden rule. We obviously fight wars of religion. It's interesting to me. I'll put it that way. That we do, given all the commonalities.
Sure.
We lose our way sometimes as humans, but
I like to think that God has been speaking the same open source message of love and welcome since the beginning of time. And certain people said, man, I got to get this down. Yeah. And that became different belief systems.
Sure. And so with their own spin on it. But the core, the
core is
tenets upon which you ought to live your life.
Right.
A stable life for yourself and a stable life for society. The cores are all the same. And
I couldn't agree more. As a lifelong Catholic myself, who used to work for a Methodist minister, my old nonprofit job at Church Health in Memphis. The idealistic Dr. Minister Scott Morris founded Church Health, and now it's one of the largest faith-based clinics that serves the uninsured in the country. So that kind of gets me to my next thing, which is a stages of growth kind of question. Can you talk a little bit about, because when people champion a cause, there's always that kind of founder or group of founders that champions cause. I also work for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, so the Danny Thomas, origin story looms large. And yes, he was famous at the time, but he still was told he was crazy for trying the thing at the time. So can you talk a little bit about Feedmore's? And I realize Feedmore is a conglomeration or a joining of 2 nonprofits. But way back in the day, even before the merging, there were those first group of people who said, by golly, somebody ought to do something. No one's doing anything. Can you talk to me about the origins? I will.
Will you allow me to go back even a little further?
Please,
So let's go to World War II. Okay. And let's go to the middle of London at night, and the bombs were falling. Right. And everyone, what did they do? They went straight to the tube, went straight to the tunnels and the subway. Who couldn't get there? Seniors. So a bunch of folks in those tubes said, we really ought to go feed those folks. That's where Meals on Wheels started.
Wow.
Some ladies from, I think it was Philadelphia, heard about it, studied it, and brought the whole Meals on Wheels idea back to Philadelphia. Some ladies from Richmond heard about the ladies in Philadelphia. Common theme here. Let's let ladies run the world more. I mean that in all sincerity. Or women. And they brought back to Richmond in 1959, studied it, took 8 years before computers, of course. And in 1967, we delivered our first meals out of a second floor building in Carey Street, Main Street here in the middle of Richmond. So that got its origin in World War II. And of course we have Meals on Wheels program here. And then food banking really started from a gentleman named John Van Hengel out in Phoenix, Arizona, who saw a bunch of fruit laying on the ground and said, golly, someone could eat that. And he was part of St. Mary's Catholic Church out there. And he started this program in 1967. and grew that, and the federal government heard about it, said that's a good program, gave him some money, and he started a more national cause called Second Harvest out of Chicago, which has turned into Feeding America. So Feed More got its origins from those, if you will, those two roots of the stream, roots of the river,
wow, yeah.
as the water flowed down. And so here in Richmond, the Meals on Wheels I told you about, but then 40 churches or so all had something like a church pantry we're all familiar with, and said, golly, I wonder if we could do more together, which is a very common tenet of me and my leadership and of anything I ever put together, where the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. And I believe that to my very core. And so lo and behold, they did. And at the very least comes scale, right? Purchasing power.
Sure.
And what could we do together that we couldn't do alone? And that's how the Central Virginia Food Bank started. With those 40 churches. And then it wound its journey through a number of executive directors, through a lot of growth. There were moments where they weren't sure they could make payroll, but it has evolved and evolved with different leadership. And as I often tell people, I'm simply a steward of this chair right now, simply a steward of this position.
Yeah.
I'm not that special. The position is, and what the position means to the organization and the mission is, I hope I do the right job in stewarding it for my time here.
Steward is a very good word, but just when I think of this, I think of like the original people deciding to champion the cause, but especially it being a cause that is perpetual as long as hunger exists. I would argue that all of your employees and especially certainly your volunteers are people who have found a way where their value system, they can express it, and they are continuing to champion the cause, just like the scientists and nurses and doctors at St. Jude and at Church Health are continuing to champion those causes. But no, it's incredible how a good idea kind of gets replicated. Yeah.
And, and you asked earlier, the whys, right? Well, some of our volunteers and some of our employees have experienced this in their lifetimes, right? And we're helped out by food banks or government assistance, whatever it may be. But literally everybody has missed 2 meals. Never met a person who hasn't. If you miss 2 straight meals, you understand hunger pains.
That's right.
And now multiply that times 3 days in the weekend when you're a child who only gets most of their meals at school. So we are a cause that people have experienced. Not every cause have people experienced.
That's true.
And so I think that helps with the connection, with the understanding of it. I think many people may have families like I did that said, part of your role on this earth, if you want to live the proper life, where true happiness comes from. My father used to quote Harry Emerson Fosdick, one of the great theologians, and he got a Riverside Church in New York City. He said, you lived your heaven and hell on earth. And that those who were good, those who gave to each other, lived in a heaven, and those who were selfish and whatever the other words you might use, lived a somewhat of a hellish existence. So I think our cause is something people can relate to either personally, have even experienced to a certain extent, and they see that it's an equal opportunity that affects everybody. Children, families, seniors, rural, urban, of any ethnicity. It's just and so it's fairly easy to come into it. And then, of course, our job here is for those who feel strongly about the cause is to make sure we make the most of their time. We make sure that we nourish their souls.
Right.
Oftentimes people say, if I could go off on a tangent on brand essence, right? Because of mission, because of these causes, it's in its own right, it kind of creates its own brand, right? I mean, St. Jude's has a brand almost next to none. Yeah. And that took some thinking. That didn't happen by chance. And so, it being my corporate background, if you look at a brand, people would say at Capital One, a brand is a promise kept. But what is brand essence, right? What brand essence is what you really do. So, if you were Volvo, we think they sell cars. They think they sell safety to you and your family. That's their brand essence. Harley Davidson is a motorcycle company. They think they sell adventure. Watch the commercial. It's not pointing out the chrome and the loud sound. It's 2 people, on a country road, the sunset in the background. Walt Disney, they'd hate it, but it's an amusement park.
Sure.
They think they sell magic. So what do, right? So what do food banks do?
Yeah.
What does Meals on Wheels do? Well, we do distribute food. I mean, and if you want to take it out of the more mission and heartfelt mission, you could say it's a logistics business. And to a certain extent it is. But we think, and we took some time going through this, we think we nourish the community and empower lives. That's what we think we're here for. So nourishing the community is food, but we feel strongly it's got to be healthy food. Diet-related diseases kill more people than alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs combined each year. And so much of that is the diet. So we want to be responsible for nourishing the community, but good food. And then back to the volunteers, we think it's important we nourish the souls of those folks who show up, of their time and their treasure. And we have to make it a good experience. When you volunteer, a chemical comes out. It produces chemicals in you that actually make you feel better.
Sure.
It's our job to make good use of their time and of their gifts. And then empowering lives food is important, but the folks we serve, it's not the only issue they have. It's rent, it's health care, it's housing, it's transportation, it's all those things.
Right.
And so we believe empowering their lives means we need to collaborate with other nonprofits, with government, and with businesses to put these folks at the center and then raise them up.
That's the other thing that you saying that reminds me. As I was your team was nice enough to give me the tour before we sat down for this interview, and one of the things that I was struck by, and this is a kind of a stages of growth kind of thing, is that Feed More has not only been the joining of two organizations, but it has just grown in terms of the specificity of what it does over time. Those first people said these people need to be fed, and then it kind of went from there. That maybe was the kind of genesis point. But can you talk about the things that maybe even some services here in the last couple of years? What are some things that during your tenure here that you've seen kind of roll on, or enhancements, or different things you do?
Yeah. Well, at its core, we distribute our food through our agencies, and those are all nonprofits. It's around 250. 70% of them are places of faith. So at the core, that's what I and the people who are here, we inherited. I think we've made that more sophisticated relative to the data we collect, relative to our communications, relative to the experience we provide for those agencies that work with us and all that collaboration. And certainly it was food. One of the big evolutions was the healthy food I already spoke to, which is expensive for food banks. It's produce, right? It's not jars of peanut butter matter. That's good protein, but they last forever. But a pallet of tomatoes doesn't. It has a 2-week lifespan, right? So lots of cold chain, lots of investment in storage and cold chain. That's a big move in food banks to. It used to be, well, calories are calories. Well, not so much anymore. Sheet cakes aren't our favorite thing to hand out. Not to say we don't now and again, but so that's been a big evolution. The other thing that I would say is the sophistication of the transportation, of the logistics side of it.
Right.
That has evolved. I would say in our case, and we are blessed with an amazing group of talented leaders and staff and folks, our marketing has become so much more sophisticated. That doesn't sound much like the cause of hunger, but you have to attract folks and you have to attract constituents. And so our very sophisticated use of data and all the things we do would rival many, many for-profit organizations. But back to this cause of hunger and health, the thing that we are seeing in a large way, and it started about 10 years ago with Meals on Wheels, is the confluence of food and the healthcare industry and system. If you look at it was an ACA, like Obamacare, but that was kind of built to create better quality, less visits if they could, and it didn't really take the cost of things down, but it did take away some of the unnecessary things, and try to provide better quality. And so if people came back into the hospital within 30 days, there was a penalty to be paid by that hospital if they were using government assistance.
Right, yeah.
So food was one of the big culprits for our seniors. Lack of nutrition, improper nutrition, caused a good 15 or 20% of them to come back. So you can see the direct correlation. So Meals on Wheels nationally got a hold of this and saw that pretty quickly. The health systems, and you might imagine the insurers, all go, I'm getting revenue from folks. And I apologize for my business speak here, but it's,
it's important.
But I do look at this. It's a cause that's so important. It demands that we
rigor
and efficiency and effectiveness and productivity, all those things that work for people with their stock prices and that world. It works for we serve more people. But they, the insurers see, well, if I can keep them from ever getting sick, isn't that good for my business? And isn't that good for our society, the way we look at it? And so now food banks have gotten very much into, if you look at Medicare patients, government subsidies and government funding is requiring now that insurance companies who get that work on community health and create a healthier community, which, by the way, prevents a lot of these things. Well, the first groups they're coming to, and rightfully so, is food banks. All of us underneath the Feeding America umbrella, there's about 199 of us. There is. All come under that, and we cover every inch of the country. So it's a natural partnership between the health systems and with the insurance companies. So you'll see in our world, that's the biggest move forward, and the one that I think provides a lot of promise for the future in terms of partnerships, in terms of revenue streams, and of really getting to the core of our mission, which is nourishing that person and empowering their lives. So, the more the healthier they are, the more empowered they are, the more productive they are, and they all deserve that chance.
As a PR pro with my own publicity practice, I'm proud to be partnering with my friends at Muckrack, an all-in-one platform that helps me build rapport with journalists and land timely media coverage. Not only does Muckrack give me the tools I need, they actively work with PR pros and journalists to build community in ways that add value to our work. If you want more information about Muckrack, visit muckrack.com. Back to the better together part.
Yeah.
If it kind of welled up within these particular churches, and yes, my own church, St. Patrick's Catholic Church, downtown Memphis, we have a mobile food pantry, and it won't surprise you, it's in conjunction with our local food bank.
There you go.
And the Rotary Club. So
yes. I feel Rotary, service above self. I love that slogan. Yeah.
So in a way, the kind of like the welling up point maybe in a lot of this, or the way this was built, was kind of maybe within a faith community. But now, but you say, how can we be more efficient at scale? But now, am I right in hearing you say that the congregations are also distribution points often?
Yeah, absolutely. So those pantries are all manned by volunteers, all staffed by volunteers, right? And in any church, there's the three people that really drive it all, but then there's a whole congregation happy to pitch in here and there.
Exactly.
And that's how it works, right? And from your books, you've got the diplomats, you got the skeptics in that, and you've got all the different rocks tumbling together, and out of that you produce some real magic.
We need different types of people.
Yeah.
To kind of go from the practical to the kind of like kind of deeper question here. What is it about human beings that, like, sometimes you see, and one of the reasons I started this podcast and started writing the book of the same name is I thought to myself, why do I have the fire in the gut so much to champion this cause? And it's like sometimes there are not normal metrics of benefit. You pay competitive salaries here, I'm sure, but oftentimes either there's no money in a cause, or you're intentionally working at a nonprofit which pays a smaller salary than you could earn otherwise. What does it say about human beings that we have a drive within us to help other people, to say this world is better for our having lived? Why are we built like that?
Well, isn't that the deepest question of the week that people have asked throughout the ages? I'm just going to contend, because it is hard to articulate, right?
Sure.
So I'm going to contend that no matter your religion or no religion, let's just call it your spirituality,
right?
That there is a soul inside this body. There is a spirit. We haven't seen it. We haven't talked to it. It hasn't shown itself, but for whatever reason, it's there and we feel it. And it is instinctual of human beings who have the ability and I'll say this through life's circumstances, to feed this, it drives them somehow. Now, sometimes it has to be taught, sometimes it has to be shown, and then people become aware. But there's something in here if it can come out. I can tell you that physiologically, your body literally changes when you do something good for someone else.
Healthy endorphins.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And that brings you back, right? It brings you back. All I know is I watch volunteers come in. It's fascinating. We have 100 employees a day, but we have over 200 volunteers each and every day.
Wow.
And you watch them come in, Marvin, and their heads are down, their brows are furrowed. Obviously, they're thinking about the rest of the day or the issues of last night or issues with the family. But they're down and they're in deep thought. And when they leave, their heads are up. Their eyes are up. They're looking towards the sky. Their countenance is completely different. And I won't tell you that our work is always the most exciting. It can be fairly mundane some days to do that, but they know full well they're doing good. So I can't answer that other than to say that it is a spiritual thing, other it is an innate, instinctual thing with humans, and I can only hope that more find it. I can only hope that people don't lose sight of it.
Right. Because
in today's world, it's an interesting world we live in. And if we can go back to that core, then a lot of the things we discuss or we angst over seem to fade away. I talk to a lot of businesses, you might imagine. I have a 35-year corporate background before I came into this world. And when I talk to folks, I was at IBM for 20 years. And fascinatingly, there was a study done many years ago, probably 25 years ago now. Why do companies last 100 years? What's the reason they do? And was it the leadership? Is it the product? Is it the price points? Is it, what is it? And it turns out the one common thread was all the employees felt that the work they did with that company was making mankind and providing a service to society. They all had that higher calling. And I think that's instinctual, and I think the companies that are smart found a way to tap into that. At IBM, it was with computers. We really felt, and we did change the world. I hope for the most part, for the good. But isn't that fascinating that that's the common thread? So whether it's for nonprofits or whether it's for profits, it's this drive and need to do good, to change society, make a difference.
Right.
As human beings, and for many of you folks who are listening, depending on where they are in life, I didn't make this up. I heard this from a brilliant counselor that I have talked to now and again. And by the way, and he would say that up until 50, it's all about contribution. It's all about success. Up until 50, it's all about success. And after 50, it's all about contribution. And you talk to folks, and sometimes it hits some people, those wise old souls, hits them at 45. Some people it's a little late, but it's no matter your walk of life, business person, nonprofit person, man, woman, any demographic, it just kind of hits that way. And so you find many folks, you see many seniors or many people who come to a certain age. It's not a surprise to me that many people over 50 who show up here. And some are retired, but some are working. And it's this idea that now that I have lived this journey I had with my successes, I am who I am, and maybe it's time to give back.
Yeah.
So that thread kind of goes throughout.
There's this almost unkillable, unsmotherable impetus to want to do good. It's like I describe it in the book as our kind of factory settings. Belief in goodness, my goodness, your goodness, and in the inevitability of goodness winning out in the end. Because I think we can listen to discouraging voices that say the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And of course, there's plenty of evidence that, there are wars going on. There's no shortage of bad news that you can ingest. And I am not suggesting that we should Pollyanna stick our head in the sand and say that the bad doesn't exist in the world. But I think for people who champion causes, there's that kind of like foundational spark of wanting to either be the change or and it's almost like I feel like we all have a kind of a higher aspirational self that's about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff. Higher up the hierarchy you go, it's about meaning. And then there's you gotta you need food and subsistence. But I feel like we've got the two voices in our ears, the ego and then our aspirational selves. And the ego's two henchmen are inner doubt and societal pessimism. The doubt says, well, you're not really all that good. Can you really help out? And pessimism says, no one's going to help you. The world's kind of like, it's every man for himself. But our higher aspirational self, it can be kind of patient, but it eventually, if we keep our hearts open, I feel like it eventually grabs the steering wheel of our life, air quotes.
Yeah.
And off we go into some form of service, and we find that those endorphins, notice it doesn't make sense if you're the mind of the ego, which only knows the kind of known knowns in the world. The success metrics of helping others don't always, quote, make sense.
Yeah.
But there is this. It's less quantifiable, but there is this intangible. And it even like you were saying, it manifests itself in our biology, in the healthy endorphins. But I just find it fascinating, the kind of wrestling match that each person has to go through between those two voices to finally let the voice of a deeper, more abiding love kind of win out and say, I'm driving this ship.
Yeah, Martin, it's fascinating. Well said. I think some of it's timing. Some of it is what triggers some of this. So you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy. If you're at the bottom of that pyramid and you're worried about safety and food and shelter, your ability to find that is minimal, right? Because you spend your waking hours not able to go to the top of that triangle.
That's right.
Where the self-actualization comes through, and this is all part of that. So many of the folks that get there are quite blessed who not be struggling at the bottom, but to be at the top and going, well, what else is there in life, right? So there's that trigger, and then there's
it's a privilege to live at that.
It is. It's a blessing, And say what you will with this country, it is not all perfect, and I certainly am working with a number of folks who've had a really rough go of it, and it's a very steep hill to climb. But relative to other countries, we're quite blessed.
That's true.
From top to bottom, quite blessed. With first world issues a lot of days, as my kids would tell me. And then the other triggers we talk about is just sometimes just the age thing of having gotten to a place where you've been able to provide and now you move to this other space. But it is a privilege. And some people are called to lead in it, right? Because there's even different folks who are in that space. Some people are called to go, I want to use my voice here. You were one of those, right? Where I'm going to take a leadership position. Some go, I want to self-actualize. I want to be part of this, but I don't need to be at the tip of the spear. I'm happy to be in this group who's doing my part in it. Right?
Sure.
I don't need to be the leader of the food pantry at St. Luke's Methodist Church. I'm happy to be the crew that, hands the food out.
Yeah.
So there is no right or wrong to this. But there is, isn't it wonderful to see the sense of camaraderie and the sense of, and it's a very positive tribe. We've gotten so tribal in today's world in our country that this happens to be a very positive tribe. And I like you alluded to it. I think people are hungry for this. I think there's a poverty in this country of this good spirit, of hearing about it, of witnessing it. And I tell folks all the time when I give talks, hey, look locally. Yes, you can discourage yourself mightily by watching national news.
Yeah.
And so many things that are, to a certain extent, out of your control. But not locally, and not on your own street. And look at the folks who are helping the elderly lady mow her grass and shovel the sidewalk.
Right.
I mean, what a joyful thing that is. How beautiful that is. Look at going down the street to come help feed more. Just look around. Don't think that we're all cut out of whatever cloths you're reading about or hearing about in these different tribes. You take that away, and you've already said it, we're so much the same with this drive and this need to go there. And aren't you fascinated by young people? So I speak to the older people who have the wherewithal, or they're done with success or on to contribution. But isn't it fascinating to watch today's generation? And maybe I missed some of the ones in between, the 16-year-olds who think. I look at some of the staff that I'm with who they're brilliant. I mean, there's so many things they could do. And if one wanted to make more money, you probably could. But that's not what their life is about. Their life is, I'm happy to have my life be centered around the mission. And by the way, I'll make some money to pay my bills
Mm-hmm.
and to support my family. But my holy grail is not how big my bank account is. It is my contribution, the footprints I'll leave through these organizations.
Sure.
And it's my job as a leader, and I feel that my calling is these days, besides believing so strongly in this cause since 10 years old, as a leader is to create an environment for all of them to make a significant difference in their lives so they can self-actualize, so they can be all they can be for their calling. And that's my role now, to create an environment that does that. Max Dupree's he was the CEO of Herman Miller Furniture, and he wrote a book, Leadership as an Art. And there's a quote in there that says, leadership means having the opportunity to make a meaningful difference in the lives of those who permit you to lead them.
Wow, yeah.
So it's an opportunity.
That, yeah.
It's not a God-given right. It can come and go.
Right.
Your job is to make a significant difference in their lives. In the old days when I started, it was workers' job to make a difference in the boss's job, right?
Yeah.
And things have luckily been flipped. The management and leadership, no, it's about making a difference in their life, which means you better get to know them. You better get to know what it is that would make a significant difference in their life. And to those who permit you to lead, it says every day you have to earn the right to lead.
Right.
One shady decision, one mistruth, one unflattering move, you've lost the right to lead. And maybe you may regain the trust, get it back. But that is, in these days, my role and my cause is to create that environment for the 100+ folks that are here.
Right. Yeah. As a parent to my wife Sarah and I have 3 children, ages 20, 17, and 13.
Fun.
So we are parents to Gen Z.
Yes.
And I'm a Gen X person myself at age 54, but I've noticed in the millennial cohort and having done a little bit of branding work too, I've looked at the kind of like generational tendencies and everything, and I think it's an encouraging trend line, quite frankly.
Good.
That the younger generational cohorts are more and more interested. They are prioritizing meaning in their work life. And that's something that this Gen Xer anyway feels a kinship to those younger generational cohorts. It's like, honestly, that's the way I've tried to be a PR pro. I've typically worked in nonprofit, and now that I work for myself, I work typically at the behest of nonprofit clients. But even in this show, like I'm drilling down to the essence of why people champion a particular cause. What drives them so hard to address this one issue, to make the world better in this one particular way? And I do it for a host of reasons, but one of the principal blessings for me as host is just like I get to be the first person who's encouraged. I get to be the first person who hears the show, and sees the good work, and so it's because I feel like we need more encouragement. We need there's plenty of bad news, and to circle back to what you were saying is like think locally. I've found that that's even a really great hack. Around the holidays, they'll say like, "Oh gosh, how are you going to be around your Thanksgiving table with people who have all sorts of different political beliefs? Like you're going to get into some uncomfortable conversations." And I found a wonderful hack when that happens, when all of a sudden you just like somebody foists some national political thing on there. I'll just say like, my own interaction with politics is, with the city council. And I relate it to my own Coliseum cause work.
Yes, of course.
And then they kind of don't know where to go with that. And they're just like, well, first of all, it's a relative of mine. So they'll be like, well, I'm proud of you for working on this thing. I like the Coliseum too. Oh, it's really interesting you're working on that. Because I think local politics tends to not have the same back and forth, left, right,
the tribal thing. Yeah, it's a shared asset you have in the Coliseum. It's a shared locality.
Right.
And all those higher order policy, perhaps principled, perhaps not, really don't affect that park or that Coliseum.
They really don't. And what's interesting is my relatives are like, okay, cool, we're talking about politics, but somehow this got completely collegial.
Yeah, because you found the common ground.
Good, let's pass the potatoes.
Right. One of the things that we do here is we declare that it doesn't matter what tribe you're in to come feed the hungry.
Right.
We declare that pretty quickly. And at work, we don't talk politics. We all have our politics.
Of course.
What you do personally and what you march on or don't march on is certainly up to you. But everyone believes you ought to feed the hungry, and for different reasons on either side of the aisle.
Isn't that great to have that common denominator?
All politicians known to man walk through our doors, and they do that in food banks. They love to come volunteer. They don't mind the photo op.
Yeah.
It says they're good people, but by and large, they do believe it when they're here. And
Sure.
so I don't think many are taking advantage of it. But it's fascinating to have that as a common. And you'll find if you just stop this, and you do it, but with that hack, if you will, but we have so much more in common than uncommon.
That's true.
We're building a new building, and I had lunch. The folks who are out there building our building, we serve them lunch every 2 or 3 months now, just because we're appreciative of the work they're doing in our building for our cause and for our community. Right. They're getting paid, but it means the world to them that the folks who are building the building do that. So I spent a lot of time just last week with a couple of the construction superintendents. And let's just say that our political beliefs may not coincide. And so what we were able to do, though, was talk about, well, what do we think we have in common? And we kind of did some of that. And then we skipped and then we went to family. And then we went to the cause we were all building a building for. And we all believed that these gentlemen had some of this in their family. And they were all just touched. And I think they felt privileged to be part of the construction of a building which is going to house the cause.
Right.
And I left going, if I would just remember that conversation, whatever we started off with politically, we went back to this common understanding of what is so core to human beings, and that's feeding each other, making each other. And then all of a sudden I went, I, Doug, need to quit being so black and white with my categorizations.
Sure.
There's a piece in the book you talk about some of that it doesn't serve much of a purpose, this black and white, because the world is shades of gray. That's true. I mean, just pure and simple. And for those who come from a moderate world and have the ability to see both sides of a coin, it's a blessing and a curse. It's wonderfully helpful. Yeah. In getting along and seeing it.
Because there's work to be done.
There is. Yeah. There is.
So I was going to say, as much as we've talked about Feedmore's evolution from these people saying, "Oh, there's a rotting fruit," that first dawning of the person saying, "Somebody ought to do better," and then we flash forward all these years, and I've marched through and taken the tour and seen so much of how that has gotten to be such a efficient machine, but there's a next level of efficiency after y'all are building a new building.
We are.
To be even bigger, stronger, better, more efficient. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we've been out of space for 3 years and love this old building. It was an old tobacco warehouse. It was not built to be a food warehouse. It's only 2 warehouses, pallets with pallets with product on top of it. Yeah. We're 2 pallets high and 4 pallets deep. So to get some product off the 4th pallet deep, you pull all 4 out, pick it, and put them all back. Well, relative to the time motion study expert, it's not so efficient. Right. So the new building will go 5 pallets high, and there would just be a pallet on either side, 1 pallet. So whereas the building isn't that much bigger than where we are, the fact that it goes up so high is just amazing with the efficiency. Wow. Because unfortunately, the hunger isn't going away. The kitchen will be easily, 50-75% bigger because we believe that medically tailored meals and meals for seniors, by the way, it's this huge growing population, as you well know, right? Society, mankind forever has been this triangle. Yeah. Well, young people here, old people like me up here. Well, in our country, by the year 2035, it'll be a rectangle. Wow. With the top 50% being seniors. Wow. Something that we've never witnessed. Interesting. As a society and even mankind, as you know, around the world, there's a lot of birth population. Birth rates are diminishing, declining. Yeah. And the senior population, which is going to wreak havoc on economies and all that. And all that. Yeah. But we know that the populations we serve, right, are going to be needing more help. So that kitchen really serves that. We have a much better area to feed the souls of our volunteers, right, for them to gather to congregate. Because guess what they love to do after they service? They love to go get together. They'll find a place to have coffee because they found like minds, and they feed on each other. This goodness feeds on goodness. Yeah. And it creates this very positive spin, perpetual wheel that keeps going. So between, unfortunately, having to serve more folks because it's not going away, the bifurcation of society is only getting worse. It's the 1%, the 99. It's going. I have some corporate friends who say it's moving to the 0.5% and the 99.5%. So that says there's still going to be need here that we all need to look after. So it's a building that's really built for the mission. It's nice to be in a new building. We're not folks that work here. We're not really about stuff. We're not stuff people. We don't brag about how big our houses are or about how fancy our cars are. So the building it's lovely. It's nice that it's new, but it's the mission inside that it serves, which is what we get most excited about.
Will you continue to use this facility in addition?
No, because as happens in organizations and in real estate deals and everything else, the city of Richmond is becoming immense. It has been, but it's even more popular these days as a destination for people to come live. So housing is a shortage of housing. Because people want to live here. It's got a lot of character. Its cost of living is very decent. People can work remote, so you can choose your spot. So our 6 acres that we're on is literally going to turn into townhouses.
Oh, wow.
We got a very large sum of money. The deal is not quite consummated, but we got a very large sum of money, which will cover easily about a quarter of our cost to the new building. So besides being out of space, besides the mission needing to be met, it was a perfect storm of the property never being more valuable. So it all came together.
Wow.
Very serendipitously, the time to sell it was the time to build, and here we go.
Wow. Yeah. What's the timeline?
We're building now, and we move in officially October 14th. We start the move before that. It's very staged. All the racking for the warehouse goes in July. The office furniture starts and goes in September. We human beings pack our boxes on the Friday before October 14th.
Yeah.
And we show up for our first day of school on the 14th.
Wow.
Very exciting.
It is actually exciting. Yeah. I would bet that that's its own unique transit of camaraderie. And the reason I say that is because my job at Church Health, we did move from a group of disparate buildings to Crosstown Concourse. Local Memphis listeners will know about Crosstown Concourse. It's an old Sears warehouse rehabbed as a 1.1 million square foot conglomeration of nonprofits, apartments, restaurants.
Big, yeah.
And so we had a move date, but then the question becomes, how do you not disrupt service, or how do you make service disruption minimal? But you have people relying on you. Are you all going to be able to make the transfer fairly seamlessly?
Right, post office, right? Rain, sleet, or snow. And during COVID, I worked at home 2 days. We re-engineered our entire operation within 3 days. Re-engineered the entire operation within 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Never missed a beat. Never missed a meal. So we get change. We understand change. We have leaders here who come from background of how to manage that. So in the case of this building, what is it? It's June. Well, we started our change management plan not last October, the year before that. So I'm going on 18 months into my change management plan, right down to the gnat's eyelash, from the very big to the very small. And the goal was that plan to be in place and being utilized by June 1, and we did. There's another gate to get through by the end of the summer where all that can be done possibly before the move is done, because the next 2 months will be whack-a-mole. Things are going to pop up, you're going to pop them down. And we'll go in as smoothly as we can because the mission requires that. And from a leader of people, morale requires that, right? You can go in, and we guide ourselves with a lot of things. We don't do drama here. Nonprofits are often rife with drama. And I happen to find it to be a very ineffective, very poor use of energy. We have issues, we have problems. Well, fascinating. Let's solve them. My whole idea of life, which is another whole story, but is to grow myself.
Right.
And where do we learn the most from? The difficult times. So we never mind problems here. We hit them head on. We learn from them. We don't want to repeat them 2 and 3 times. And so that's when you work this way, then all of a sudden the move becomes a fascinating challenge and one to learn and grow from, and to take seriously. And then our goal is to move in as lightly, politely, as pleasantly as we can. And we're on our way. There've been a few bumps, but yeah.
So let's talk about the growth thing, because there's the quest for meaning, and sometimes it's responding to a need and having that healthy endorphin. I met a need today, but there's also learning through failure and learning through fits and starts. Talk to me about growth. And this is so cherry pick from any point in your career you want, or maybe a greatest hits of hits that you of growth. What is it about? Because growth can be painful, pruning, all that, the whole idea. But having been through times of trial myself, it's often in hindsight you look back and it's like that's where you grew.
Wasn't
right?
That something? Yeah.
So but
what a gift it was, right?
It is a gift.
Always in hindsight.
In hindsight, at the time, it's terrible, right?
Not
it's
so
like,
much
woe is me, right?
Not so much in the moment.
But talk to me a bit about growth and why you relish it so. Or
I've been blessed somewhere along the line to have come up with this philosophy of life, and I think an awful lot of folks in the world live life without really understanding their philosophy or their intentions behind it, and I think that's a missed opportunity. I get there are reasons why, right? Back to that Maslow needs, but even those of means and stuff, I often look at them and go, I wonder if you could go a little deeper with yourself and kind of why you're on this earth. And some do, some don't. Fair enough. With me, I grew up with depression parents, right? I'm a boomer. So those of us who did, the idea of life was to be successful. Because from depression parents, life was about make money, look after the family. So I grew up with this holy grail of move up the corporate ladder, be successful, big titles, whatever it may be, and that was it. And somewhere along the line in my younger 30s, I was working 70-hour weeks. I was losing my family, losing my sense of self. I was at IBM, and I said, I don't think this is worth it. I know it's not worth it. I'm committed to my marriage. I'm committed to my family. And I was going to be an executive. And IBM got top heavy, and they truncated. If you didn't have 200 people, you were no longer executive. So literally hundreds of executives in the country weren't anymore. So I'm one level beneath it. And I said, when will I now become one? They said, well, you're now behind that line. So that's probably another 5 years. So you go, 70-hour weeks, another 5 years. Family will be gone. I won't know who I am. And was this worth it? I said, I'm going to truncate my career, which was like the worst thing in my life you could ever do. You were brought up to never do that. Why would you? And I was worried about what everyone thought. Don't we all worry about what people think? Or we worry about our parents think. In my case, my parents.
Sure.
And so I said, well, I'm making the call. Send me to Richmond or Charlotte, and I'll go back and be a peddler. I'll go back and be a salesman, which I dearly loved. I'd long gone past that and done other things at IBM. And when I told me, I go, well, Marvin, I took a step down. I'm truncating my career. I'm moving to Richmond, and kind of sheepishly like I'm kind of a failure. And you would go, no, remind me again, because IBM you were right. So I'm shocked that they didn't all know exactly what the company was and where my position was. That they didn't. And they'd all go, well, are you happy with the decision? I go, well, I am. Well, I'm so pleased for you. I'm so happy for you. They weren't judging me. Right? They weren't saying, oh my goodness, you truncated your career. What's going to happen to your life? I was shocked. I had in my head that I should live my life this way and what others thought. And that very moment, that very course of 2 or 3 months of having those conversations freed me up for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow.
To then be on my journey and in my case, I can't speak to everyone, to not worry what others thought. Within reason, you should be,
of course,
should be aware. But not to drive my journey through that and their opinions of how I was doing or wasn't doing. And to this very day, I quit worrying about appraisals. I'm very hard on myself. They were never as hard on me as I was when I got appraisals through corporate life, because I didn't work from fear anymore. What are you going to? People in the work world often work from fear. If I make a mistake, I lose my job. I truncate my career. It's such a wasted emotion set of energies that I quit working from fear. And so, well, if the fear isn't driving me, then what is? And then I realized that I've got this. I'm sure both kids have it. I'm sure I'm ADD. But I'm fascinated by bright, new, shiny objects. And new challenges. So then I realized something dawned on me that's that drives me. It's not necessarily, it's just new objects. It's kind of like this, squirrel. It almost didn't matter what. I'm just fascinated by
the novelty.
The new challenges and novelty. So that became a theme. And then I realized that every time I took on a new challenge, they were rarely easy, because new stuff is rarely easy. It's new. You don't know it. You're a beginner. You're not an expert anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And so I realized, oh my gosh, that's where my real growth comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I saw there was a lot of joy in that I could through these hard times get that growth. And I happened to read a book by Scott Peck called The Road Less Traveled. You're probably familiar with it.
I am familiar with The Road Less Traveled.
Yeah,
I am Scott Peck.
Exactly right.
Yeah, great book.
It's been around forever, right? I don't think many people know of it now, but bestseller forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 3 words were life is difficult.
Yep.
And in that chapter, he says, once you come to accept that life is difficult, it ceases to be so. Mm-hmm. So push against me here. We getting very far?
No.
Right? No, we Americans only find joy on Friday afternoons because the weekend's coming, or on the weekend, or summer vacation because we didn't go to school during the summer, or when life is good, and we think that's when life is good or life is fun. And no, when life is difficult, it's not worthy, or it's not. We're missing the whole point. You must accept that life is difficult, and then when you come to accept it, you quit fighting it because we didn't get very far. You embrace it. Yeah, and if you've been able to, like I have, realize that my goal in life is to grow my soul and spirit, and to a certain extent help other people do that, then I won't say I sabotage myself, but I never mind the difficult times because it's always a gift. I quit drinking for 10 years because I needed to. Mm-hmm. I won't tell you that was easy, but it was such a gift.
Sure.
To work through the reasons I did more than I should have. Whatever the stresses were, whatever the backgrounds were, those angels on either side.
Yeah.
What's this one? Yeah. Where did that come from? Where is its origin? Where is its genesis? Until you deal with that, you will try to find some escape mechanisms. But I look back and go, what a gift. I won't tell you it was much fun, but what a gift.
Yeah.
And all my difficult times, always here at work, we'll have a really challenging thing pop up with senior leaders, and I go, well, won't this be fascinating?
That's a great attitude to have.
And one of my young ones said, why do you say? I go, because it is. It's. They won't take our firstborn. They're not going to take our right arm. It'll be a situation for us to step into, fix, learn from, grow others from, and move on.
Right.
Fascinating.
I think sometimes we have to be thrown into crisis.
Yes.
So I encountered a pandemic related job layoff. And I'd never been laid off before, and I said, but now that I'm on the other side of it, the anxiety and the depression and the finding myself again, it was a tough thing. But being on the other side of it now, I look back on it and I really I appreciate it for what I learned about myself, and I wouldn't go back and sacrifice the growth to have my old job and my old salary back. Mm-hmm. And I just think that sometimes life has to rattle off a couple of those things for you to start to realize a pattern. And I see in you someone who's kind of somewhat operationalized it. Now you can cite it.
That's really well said. Yeah.
You can cite it, and it's like, oh, look at that interesting thing. Oh, we got a problem. Oh, well, all right.
Yeah. And it changes that perspective. Changes everyone else's perspective because they're a little doom and gloom, a little drama, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe it's an opportunity. It doesn't take away its difficulty or challenges.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just fascinating to see and to watch. As Richard Rohr. You must know Richard Rohr, the Franciscan monk. And, was it Falling Up? Falling Up, I think, is his book.
Yeah.
When he talks about those types of things, and we as humans rarely do we, and we should do more, but rarely do we impose much change on ourselves. Mm-hmm. What we find is, and what I found in COVID is one of the most indefatigable thing in this world, bar none, is the human spirit. Mm-hmm. Bar none.
That's right.
What we all went through. And we were like, I can get through that. People who've lost parents, people who've lost children, people who've lost whole families. I mean, we have no idea how resilient we are. Mm-hmm. But you get punch after punch after punch, and there are people who can recite 7 or 8 or 9 of them, and they're still standing.
Yeah.
Right? They're, at the end, they're still standing. And so I always admire people who create new chapters. Some of us have them created. I myself was laid off 3 times at IBM, found my way back in each time. I wouldn't have imposed that on myself, but I found a lot of what I've was made of similar to you. We have a woman who's leaving here after 15 years. And some of the younger people who leave, they come in a little with trepidation, going, I'm sorry I'm leaving. I go, why? Why? I admire you so much that you would create this change in your life, that you would, and leaving something that's fairly safe, that you're very good at, you're admired for, and we appreciate what you do, and yet you're imposing this change upon yourself. I can only assume, some of it may be for money, but so much of it in our society today is for that change, is for that growth, whether they quite can articulate it or not.
Yeah.
And I wish more people would understand the joy of that and the challenges, but the benefits and the gifts of that after the fact.
Yeah. My mom often listens to this podcast,
Hi,
and
Mom.
so she will love the fact that you brought up the road less traveled. When I was a kid, one year my mom read The Road Less Traveled, and she loved it so much that she just bought a box of them, and everybody for Christmas got The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And my dad, who I also loved dearly, he passed away a couple of years ago. He would rib part of the way that he and my mom got along was like the art of gentle ribbing, and so like for years, like with any topic of a gift, like, well, what should we get that person? Long silence, but Dad would be like, you could get them The Road Less Traveled, and it became this kind
Gift
of
that keeps on giving,
inside joke. But what's funny and the kind of dumb thing is, as a kid, I was like, well, I'm not reading The Road Less Traveled. I don't want some book like that. I later read it as an adult, and I realized how smart my mom was, and what indeed a great book that was. Anyway, fantastic book. But that's a total aside. But no, I think that's right. I admire people who choose to continue to challenge themselves. A job layoff is forced upon us, but then we have to kind of rise to the challenge. And I needed to wallow in misery for a second and feel sorry for myself and twist in the wind a bit.
Yes.
And it's like even that part, but people are like, dude, why didn't you just go into business for yourself a year before you did? Why did you keep? Because I needed to.
There's some process, right?
Because I needed to.
There's some process. We have to go through it and feel sorry for yourself. I did the same thing my first occasion. And the second time around, I went, well, my approach the first time how'd that work out for me, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, someone pulled me out of my depths and said, hey, I want you to come work for me in another division of IBM.
Sure.
So luckily, I was serendipitously saved for that. But the lesson learned there was that didn't work out so well.
Right.
Let's not take that approach the next time.
Right.
Let's lean into it, right? Let's lean into it. And I hope that anyone out there who has had change imposed upon them, I hope you will take the minutes to go back and reflect like you and I have about what happened and to put those arrows in our quiver and pull them out again. Don't let that be a wasted gift.
Right.
It sits on a shelf somewhere. Go back and go deeper on ourselves. We don't, as human beings, we don't do well with speaking to our emotions.
Yeah.
And going deeper. There's a reason we want someone to speak their emotions. It's easier to give them a set of magazines and cut out the pictures that portray your emotions or what you're feeling right now. It's a trick you can do to get them to understand what's going on. But boy, tap into that, right? I mean, be aware, right?
Yeah, it was an incredible gift to grow, but you don't realize it at the time, and that's the reason. The other kind of lasting gift of it is a real appreciation for the people. Friends, family, obviously, but sometimes just loose business associates had a key coffee, and there's their compassion for me, or whether that lead on a job ever panned out or not.
Right.
It was the fact that they were willing to take the time, and now I find myself going out to coffees with people who've been laid off.
Right.
And it's like I have a deeper sensitivity because it's like the whole Alcoholics Anonymous thing. Like
It sure is.
Alcoholics are the best to like train up a fellow alcoholic.
Exactly right.
But and I feel a deep sense of gratitude for those people and a sense that I need to pay that forward.
Yeah. So as you and I are talking here about our journeys and about these, what we would say would be gifts in our lives that we've learned we can repeat, right? That we can continue to do and continue to have this quest of growth and self-actualization. I think that one of the blessings for me and for many people who find this is that sure, you can find new growth opportunities in employment and in hobbies and whatever else it may be. But one of the things so many of us have learned is you can take your desire to grow as a human being and self-actualize and combine that with a cause, right? With a cause that means something to you, that you have a personal affinity to. There's some connection, right? That really sparks the passion There's something inside, whether it's your history, whether it's something, but take your desire for growth to that cause which sparks your passion, and all of a sudden you've hit the Holy Grail, right? Which is the whole center of your book, the whole center of your purpose in doing this. And it's just a joy for my life to have been able to do that and to enable it for others. And I know the same with you. But fascinating, isn't it?
No, I think that's absolutely right. You really crystallized that, maybe better than any guest I've had on this podcast. But I think that's right. I think that like it becomes the way we live out that value in our lives. So, Doug, as in closing here, we've talked a bit about the cause of hunger, how Feed More has addressed it, how it's grown over the years, and how it's just about to grow. But is there anything maybe I didn't think to ask that you want to talk about where the life of Feed More is going here in the next 5, 10, maybe even 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I can certainly tell you that the next 5 years is to continue to manage to the growth. To pursue this health industry collaborative partnerships and really do that. Past that, we here believe strongly we should be looking out 10 and 20 years. And really, in any organization, business or nonprofit, you must be strategic, right? You must be purposeful with what you do. We have a lot of donors who give us tens of millions of dollars literally every year.
Wow. Yeah.
And it is our job to make sure we manage their trust in us, their investment in us. And so we can't just kind of work on the seat of our pants. That's not fair to them. It's certainly not fair to our clients. So we spend a lot of time looking out to the future. We have some grave concerns around food sourcing and the efficiency of the food industry and how efficient it's getting. And so much of their inefficiencies helps food banks. So we know that's coming. We're going to have to raise more money to purchase more food, that sort of type of thing. We're looking an awful lot at AI, or artificial intelligence. We understand that it's coming. It's coming far faster than people know and in much bigger leaps. It's completely technology-driven, machine learning on top of machine learning. It will overwhelm humans before you know it, for good and for not so good, and lots of social disruption. So we have grave concerns about whole swaths of our society. 30-year-old women, 40-year-old women with college degrees have never seen work, conceivably. It'll take humans a long time to catch up on the changes it creates for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of productivity. I might contend, unfortunately, it's being driven by market-driven and capitalism because for profitability. I get all that. I came from that world. I get it's a force in our country, and most times for good. Lots of social disruption that's coming. Look at vehicles. Autonomous cars are well on their way. One of the companies I'm very familiar with, I won't name, but predict 70% less car ownership. Autonomous Uber cars without the driver. Auto insurance industry will go out of business. There won't be any auto insurance. You won't own a car. You'll get renters. You get driver's insurance. So whereas that's coming. That's technology driven. That's coming. On the other hand, the good side of that is it helps seniors immensely. One of the huge issues with seniors is transportation.
Yep.
Now they simply press a button on their phone and here comes this car to their front door. So fascinating.
Yeah.
AI, one of the wonderful things about it is if you're under 30 now, you have a greater than 50% chance of living to 100. So health-wise and technology-wise, what it will do with that is fascinating. So, yeah, we worry a lot about some of the forces and the mega trends that Thomas Friedman wrote a book, Thanks for Being Late, fascinating book, speaks to that will be so disruptive that human beings, our usual tools and wherewithal may not be up for the task. And so what does that do? And where do food banks land in the middle of that to help other citizens as these trends happen? So we can't predict the exact future. I could tell you that I'm 98% sure that's going to happen. I can't tell you exactly when.
Sure.
So we're thinking that way. We're thinking about food sourcing, thinking about what happens with drones that deliver food. Should we create a drone landing pad beside our building so when the food they couldn't deliver, someone isn't there, they'll drop it off at our facility.
Wow.
If you understand the future, then you can start working. What's it, Gordie Howe said, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's going. So in any strategy, understand where the future is. And it's all the futures have very similar thoughts these days. You read all their books, work backwards from that and be prepared for it. And don't we owe that to our society?
Yeah.
For a group that wants to do good, well, make sure you understand where the world's going so you can continue that good cause and do it strategically, intelligently, and with a big, big heart.
Yeah. You got to be prepared, but you also have to be flexible because of that
Indeed.
growth that's going to come. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. Be flexible with yourself, your own self-actually, be flexible with the organizations, and be ready to take on this world, whatever it gives us, and isn't that the joy?
It's true.
Yeah.
Where can people go to find out more about Feedmore?
Oh, feedmore.org.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. Yeah,
Pretty
it's a
simple,
fascinating organization, beautiful, beautiful people that look after it of all that we do. And I know in my case, it's been one of the great honors of my life to steward this position for the 12 years I've been here. It's been just fascinating and a wonderful chapter.
Yeah. Doug, thank you so much for being on
Marvin,
Champions of the Lost Causes. It's
been
a real pleasure.
This has been a real honor, to be honest with you, and a real pleasure. You're a beautiful human being. Thank you.
Well, you're kind. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
You bet.